Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Your Life Together Girl Mini Mindset Reset. I'm your host, Danielle Van. As a cognitive behavioral therapist, a life coach to women, and author, one thing has become abundantly clear. So much of what gets in our way in our daily lives is not only how we think, but what we think, our mindset. Because of that, every other week, I'm taking your requests and questions and handing over quick, easy to use, practical strategies and life tools to help you shift your thinking, create calm, help you understand and express your emotions, harness your inner power, and learn how to navigate your personal story in 15 minutes or less. After all, how else can you get your life together? So let's shift your perspective with the tools and conversations that help you in the throes of change. The Get Your Life Together Girl podcast mini mindset reset starts right now. The word safety comes up so often, whether in private session or here on the podcast. And there's a reason for it, because everything starts and ends with safety. And it is one of those things that if you don't have it, the result of it is creating control and creating these walls around us that we think will create safety, and yet it does the complete opposite. And so since there have been so many questions about safety coming into the Get Your Life Together Girl now at gmail.com email address, I thought that I would kind of combine all of those and give you a very practical tool that I teach in private session that has opened the eyes of so many people and given them an understanding of how they are creating a lack of control in trying to create safety. And so grab a pen, grab a piece of paper. This is something that I want you to actually have as a tangible that you can look at and keep around you until it becomes a very unconscious or subconscious thought pattern for yourself. It's a stopgap, really. Again, as I have said so many times, we don't know what we don't know until we know it. And this is one sort of, we'll call it model or tool that I created in hopes of giving you an aha moment. So in today's Mindset Reset, let's talk about why we screw up when there's a lack of safety. Of course, there are many different forms of safety. What we're talking about here is emotional and mental safety. Let's define that so that we can use this within our understanding. So at the top of your piece of paper, or if you are kind of logging this in mentally, I want you to lock in what emotional safety is. And it's this feeling of being accepted and embraced for who you are and what you need. It's the achievement of attachment in a relationship that is open and vulnerable, and that is even with the self. I want you to think about the fact that emotional safety comes from within, right? Even if somebody tries to give us emotional safety from the outside, it doesn't really hit as much as establishing our own form of safety. So know that it comes from within you, and as it comes, it's from doing the work to identify, to understand, and to feel your emotions. You know what they mean, you know what they are, and you know how they operate through you, okay? And you express those with true authority, vulnerability, and authenticity to others, and within yourself too. It's feeling safe away from the thought distress or the isolation. It's built in honesty, communication, credibility. It's a space of peace within yourself. I want you to really think about that. That's what emotional safety is. So where we screw up when we do not feel the elements of emotional safety, we get into a space of not feeling safe, not only mentally and emotionally, but sometimes physically and even spiritually, and it can impact us financially. So here's what I want you to write down or to lock in. The lack of safety is, very simply, not feeling safe. So put that as your header. Lack of safety is not feeling safe. And then put an arrow down, because when we don't feel safe, there's a chain reaction that happens not only in the mind, but in the emotional body and even within the physical body. So when we don't feel safe, that leads to uncertainty and sometimes fear. Okay, so if we don't feel safe, we begin to what? We begin to question. So lack of safety, put an arrow down, equals fear/uncertainty. Think about what happens when there is uncertainty. We can overthink, right? We can begin to try to rush our way to solution. We try to put in safety through the lens of control. When control isn't present, what do we feel? Helplessness, right? Or this feeling of persistent anxiety, or we feel like we don't have impulse control, or we feel like what we need and what we want isn't going to be met, and that puts us into fight or flight. So when we feel a lack of safety, fear and uncertainty really is elevated, and that leads to us trying to create a sense of control. So there's your next arrow down. So you should have a header of lack of safety, a header of fear and uncertainty, and then trying to create a sense of control. So this happens all the time. So let me give you an example of, say, a relationship ending. This is a big one. This is a place where we already kind of know that this is going to happen, or maybe we don't, but we begin to feel really big emotions, and those emotions do not feel safe, and therefore it brings up the uncertainty. What is this going to look like? Am I going to stay in this forever? And then we try to create a sense of control around our emotions, and then the next step happens where we begin to seek solution and resolution. Now, that hits on the 5 masters of our lives that I talk about all the time: emotional, mental, spiritual, physical, financial. We try to get into a space where we find solutions towards our feeling and the lack of safety. This is a very extremely difficult place for a lot of people to be in, because they feel that they actually are moving into a space that is so uncomfortable that they don't know how to meet it. And so seeking solution and resolution really goes one of 2 ways. So off of this header, again, I'm going to go through it over and over again so that you have it. It's a lack of safety or not feeling safe, which has an arrow down to fear and uncertainty, which has an arrow down to trying to find or create a sense of control, which leads to seeking solution/resolution. And then off of those, like 2 arrows pointing down, when we get into that seeking solution and resolution part, we can actually find an end point, right? So one part of the arrow is the problem ends. There is resolution, right? And that feels good. We get out of the cycle of thought and feelings, and we just know that we can move on to something else. A sense of safety has been established, even if it wasn't something that we had to sort of fight our way to, right? But on the other side, we can go through this space of, like I just said before, overthinking. And every time we overthink, we begin to forecast. How is this going to play out? How are the things going to come into balance? How am I going to be okay? What is that? What is forecasting? It's anxiety, right? Anxiety is all about looking towards the future without enough evidence to create a path forward. So we're going through all of those massive what ifs, and we really strangle ourselves from being able to make a firm decision. And when that happens, guess what happens? It elevates that feeling of not being safe. So overthinking leads to anxiety, which leads to that feeling of stuck. It's that place I hear so often: I don't know what to do. I don't feel like I have answers. I don't feel safe here. I'm emotionally exhausted. I really don't know how to move forward. And that is a very dangerous place for a lot of people to be in, because that's where the spiral begins. And so if that's the case, if we don't have resolution, if we're in overthinking, we're in anxiety, we're in stuck, what is the brain's number one job? It's to find and create safety. It will naturally, without fail, go to the things, the coping mechanisms, the behaviors that it knows will ease the anxiety. It will ease the pain that you're feeling. So that's your next header. If you don't have resolution, but you do find yourself overthinking and in stuck or in anxiety, the next place, the next header is coping mechanisms, which equals your behavior. We truly fail to realize that coping mechanisms are these things, these behaviors that really do try to keep us safe. Even if they're not safe themselves, that is their purpose. Many times our coping mechanisms are the one thing that keep us alive, that allows us to feel something in hopes of really just keeping us mentally stable or at least active, okay? And so we also fail to realize that those things, these coping mechanisms, don't have to be what tends to be the societal norm, air quotes, of what a coping mechanism is. It doesn't have to be drinking. It doesn't have to be smoking or substance abuse. It can be things like perfectionism. It can be the sense of needing to create control by handling every detail, by people pleasing, by doing things that do not serve you in hopes of taming the beast of the lack. Okay? When we're taming the beast of not feeling safe, it doesn't have to be what everyone else thinks as negative behaviors. It can be these things that you've used against yourself. So from there, the coping mechanisms and the behavior, that will lead us into seeking validation or trying to find additional proof of safety. This is the space I talk about all the time, that your brain needs evidence, right? So we begin to look into our lives and get outside validation for how we feel and for our safety in hopes that we provide safety. It's a fake form of safety, though, right? It's where we say you cannot seek validation from outside of yourself and feel good about it. And the truth is you can't connect to it. So again, we try to find a sense of belonging. We lean in, we hand over our entire story in hopes that someone says, wow, what can I do for you? Right? And we people please. We do these things of seeking validation. And remember, the only place validation comes from is within, much like safety. If someone tells us we're okay and we believe it, it means we connect to it. And we can actually stop it there too and create a new sense of safety. A lot of times people will say, oh, well, look how much you do have in your life. It goes back to that thought philosophy that I say all the time, that you can't fail 100% at 100% of things, right? It's not possible. And so sometimes people will hand that over to us and we go, oh, okay. And we renegotiate, we pivot so that we feel safe again. We kind of like, wow, that was stupid. I wasted a lot of time in that feeling. And we find a new place of groundedness. That's great. It can stop there. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people just say, you need to think about how you feel, or are you sure that's true? And it doesn't give us enough to go off of while we're seeking validation. And so that will lead us into the next category, which is heavy thoughts. And anytime we have gotten to this space, it's pretty much guaranteed that we're going to feel emotional loneliness, right? We have this sense of lack that's deeper than the safety at that point. That is where we say, I do so much for everyone else and no one does it for me. I have to pay someone to listen. I have to do this and that, and I am standing here completely alone. This is where most people feel that they have hit rock bottom. This is the ultimate sense of not feeling safe, the AKA breaking point, right? So I want you to think about this. If I am in a space of woe is me, is it time to really look at what caused me to not feel safe in the beginning? What was it that took me down this line? And I'm going to give you the headers again, because if we get to this breaking point and we don't stop it in its tracks, what happens? The cycle starts over. The spiral continues, and often it takes some massive movement for us to get out of our own way. So I want you to think about how this all plays out. You can probably see it in your life. You can see where a lack of safety has caused more trouble than good. And so here are the header categories again. A lack of safety or not feeling safe, arrow down, leads to fear and uncertainty. Arrow down, that leads to trying to find or create a sense of control. Arrow down, that has us seeking solution and resolution. This splits off and we either find it and the problem ends, or we find no solution or resolution and we begin to overthink, have anxiety, and feel stuck. If that occurs, we have a space that we move into that is equal to coping mechanisms and behaviors. It's the things we use against ourselves. From there, we begin to seek validation to try to find proof of our safety. And if we don't do that, if we can't find that for ourselves, that leads us into heavier thoughts and feeling emotionally alone. It's this sense of true lack. It is our breaking point. It is the ultimate place and space of not feeling safe at all. And then the cycle starts over. So if you want to get into a space where you are feeling safe and you know that you can move yourself through any situation, you have to cut this off in the thought process, okay? Before we even get into that space of uncertainty, we begin to question and we ask ourselves, what is going on? Why do I feel this way? What about this situation is not working for me? How can I look at this moment, see this lack of safety, and put a stopgap of what is causing me to feel this way, and really move into a space where I know that I actually have true control and not the faked sense of it. Not feeling safe can cause so many life disruptions. It is a fundamental need of ours, whether it is emotional or mental or spiritual or physical or financial. We have to know that we are safe. And there is no one, no matter what they do, that can give you that sense of safety like you can give yourself. So I want you to think about that. Every time that I start feeling like the world is ending or things are upside down, I don't know what is going on, that you actually have the potential to screw up your safety, right? And so you have to become very intentional about knowing where you are on this scale and knowing how to get out of it. If I don't feel safe, I have to question why. If fear arises, you have to give myself this space that I know that I can get out of it, and I have to identify what I'm actually fearful of. What factor in this makes me feel so uncertain? If I'm trying to create a false sense of control, I have to ask why. Why don't I actually lean into the thing that is going to give me a sense of control? From there, if I begin to seek resolution and solution and I can't find any and I lean into overthinking, I have to put a stopgap in the thought and say to myself, this isn't working. I have to get down to just the facts. You've heard me say that over and over again. I have to get down to just the facts. Not I feel, I know. And from there, if I have anxiety, I have to question, am I living in a space of what ifs? If I feel stuck, that means that I'm leaning into coping mechanisms. And am I doing things that are really working against me in hopes that I create safety? If so, what are they and how am I changing the rhythm of my actions? From there, if I'm seeking validation from someone else to make me feel safe, I know that I actually have to give myself this sense of self-belonging and listen to my inner voice. I have to get still. Maybe you do the brain dump. Maybe you take a moment to sit in silence and listen inward. From there, if I know that I haven't done that, guess what? My thoughts are going to be off with the races and they are running amok, right? And that has taken complete control over everything. And I'm literally driving myself crazy. I have to get into a space that I stop the thought. what am I thinking? Why am I thinking that? How do I redirect myself? And if I feel emotionally alone, does that mean that I need to reach out? You are in control of your safety. This is where we screw it up. I hope this helps really identify how important safety really is and how you can actually catch it from getting into a spiral. But use this diagram as a way to keep yourself in check, really, when safety is being rocked. You don't have to screw up your safety. In fact, you can actually elevate it. And I hope you will. I challenge you to do that. Thank you so much for listening to the Get Your Life Together Girl mini mindset reset. If you have a subject or strategy request, email us at getyourlifetogethergirl@gmail.com. Or you can visit our website at getyourlifetogethergirl.com. If you're looking for daily inspiration or tips and tools, join the growing community at Get Your Life Together Girl on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Thank you for being a valuable member of this community. Until next time, be kind to yourself and others.